Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with our Mishna Yomi. We begin today a new Masechet Pesachim. I highly encourage everyone to Bezrat Hashem Bli Neder take upon themselves to join us through our journey through the Mishnayot, Mishna Yomi, 2 Mishnayot a day. Chazal tell us Davar Bi'ito Matov, how fortunate we are that Hashem scheduled the Mishna Yomi that we should begin learning Masechet Pesachim only a few weeks before the holiday of Pesach. Bezrat Hashem comes upon us. Bezrat Hashem Bli Neder, we should strengthen ourselves in our Mishna Yomi journey and take advantage of the Mishnayot as they will pertain to the upcoming holiday of Pesach. The Masechet begins with the first obligation that applies as Pesach approaches, Bi'ur Chametz, eliminating Chametz. Now this mitzvah is stated in the Torah, in Sefer Shemot, chapter 12, Pasuk 15, Ach bayom harishon tashbitu se'or mibatechem. On the first day you shall eliminate leaven from your houses. The sages teach that the first day refers to the day before Pesach, meaning the 14th of Nisan. They also teach that the Torah requires the search to take place no later than midday, as the Gemara tells us in Masechet Pesachim, page 4b and 5a. This is the biblical law. The rabbis decreed that chametz must be eliminated at least 1 hour before midday, like we will see Bezrat Hashem Bli Neder in the Mishnayot. We are therefore obligated before midday on the 14th of Nisan to search for chametz in any place where chametz is brought the rest of the year, and then to destroy it. Now, searching and destroying is not the only way to fulfill the obligation of eliminating chametz. Another method is to resolve in our minds that any chametz in our possession has no use or value, making it legally null and void. This is known as bitul, nullification. Now the rabbis, however, decreed that nullification is not enough. Even a person who nullified his chametz must still search for and destroy it. The rabbis were concerned that one might find an appealing piece of chametz on Pesach and consider eating it, thereby withdrawing the nullification. And according to some, the concern is that he might actually eat it. So to prevent this, the rabbis ruled that we may not rely on nullification alone, but also must search for and destroy all the chametz in our possession, as the Rav explains in the first Mishnah that we will Bezrat Hashem Bli Neder be reading soon. Now, on the other hand, the rabbis also decreed that searching is not enough on its own without nullification, because one who searches for chametz might not find it at all, and then if he comes across the mischametz on Pesach and fails to destroy it immediately, he would be guilty of possessing chametz on the holiday, on the festival. However, if he had also nullified this chametz, no prohibition would be transgressed in the event that some chametz is found on Pesach, since it is null and void. It therefore comes out that the rabbis required both methods, searching and nullification. Therefore, the obligation to search for chametz can either be biblical or rabbinic. Now, in the case of one who nullified his chametz, like the rabbis require us to do, the obligation of searching is only rabbinic. But for one who did not nullify his chametz, the obligation of searching is biblical. And this chapter deals with the halachot of how to conduct the search for chametz. I highly recommend everyone who can obtain an art scroll elucidated to read the general introduction. It goes through the different laws, the rules of Passover. We just read the introduction to chapter 1, and we begin now Bezrat Hashem with Perek Aleph, Mishnah Aleph, chapter 1, Mishnah 1. Now the Torah prohibits owning chametz on Pesach. To avoid transgressing this prohibition, we must search for and destroy all of our chametz before Pesach, and the rabbis set rules for how this search should be conducted. The Mishnah says, Or la'arba'asar, on the night of the 14th of Nisan, which is the day before Pesach, botkim et chametz le'or haner, we search for chametz by the light of a candle, which the commentators explain, so that if there is chametz in our possession, we will find it and can then remove it. And the commentators explain, the Mishnah began, Or la'arba'asar, we translated it as on the night of. Now, although the word or usually means light, here it means night. Now, the Tan of the Mishnah avoided using the word laila, night, because he did not want to start the tractate with the word that implies darkness and absence. Instead, he used the word or, light, as a euphemism. The classic example of this style of speech is where a blind person is called sagi nehor, which literally means one full of light. Now, on the night of the 14th of Nisan, which is the day before Pesach, this is the night that comes before the daytime of the 14th of Nisan, because in the Jewish calendar, the Rav explains, the day begins at nightfall. So like we said, we search for chametz by the light of a candle. The Gemara on page 7b and 8a explains that the rabbis required a candle because it is particularly effective for searching, that if any chametz is in our possession, we'll find it and remove it, which the commentators explain. The Rav writes, the search must be carried out at night and not the next morning, even though the ownership of chametz is biblically permitted until midday, because people are at home at night, and also because the light of a candle is brighter at night. In Mishnah 3, the Mishnah will discuss one who failed to search at night, what the appropriate law is. The Mishnah continues, Kol makom she'en machnisin bo chametz en tzarich b'dika. Any place into which chametz is not usually brought during the year, for example, a cellar where barrels of wine are stored, it does not require searching. V'lama amru shtei shurot b'martef. If so, the Mishnah says, why did the sages say that we must search for chametz between the barrels in 2 rows in the wine cellar, which the Rav explains? The Mishnah will cite a disagreement about the meaning of 2 rows in a wine cellar. All agree, however, that a wine cellar must be searched to some extent. The Mishnah says, Makom shemachnisim bo chametz. The answer is that the sages were speaking of a place into which chametz is sometimes brought, such as a cellar from which wine is taken to serve at a meal. Since this type of cellar is entered during meals, people might go into it while holding bread and leave it there. Which the Gemara explains, a person might go down into the cellar with bread in his hand, and then in order to free his hand to take some wine, put the bread down and leave it there. Now a cellar in which wine is stored for sale does not require a search, since chametz is never brought there, as the commentaries explain. Now Tanaim disagree, like we mentioned, how to define 2 rows in the cellar, which, like we mentioned, is the part of a wine cellar that must be searched. Bet Shammai omrim, Bet Shammai say, Shtei shurot al pnei chol hamartef. We must search the 2 layers of barrels that cover the entire surface of the stack of barrels in the cellar, which whoever can see in the elucidated diagram that's brought down, it's referring to the vertical layer, floor to ceiling, that faces the entrance, and the horizontal layer, back of the cellar to the front, that faces the ceiling. Now, a person who stores barrels of wine arranges them in straight rows on the floor, 1 row in front of the other, from the back of the cellar to the entrance. Once he has filled the floor, he puts barrels on top of those already in place. Then he puts a 3rd layer of barrels on top of the 2nd layer, and so on. A block of barrels is therefore formed, consisting of vertical layers from the floor to the ceiling, and horizontal layers from the back of the cellar to the entrance. Now, according to Beit Shammai, we must search for chametz over the entire outside surface of the block, meaning the vertical layer nearest the entrance and the horizontal layer nearest the ceiling. Again, whoever can see in the diagram. Bet Shammai used the word shurot to mean layers, not rows. Bet Hillel omrim, but Bet Hillel say, Shtei shurot chitzonot shehen ha'ilionot. We need to search only the 2 outer rows that are the highest, meaning the 2 highest rows of barrels in the vertical layer that faces the entrance. According to Bet Hillel, according to Bet Hillel, one needs to search only the top 2 rows of the vertical layer that faces the entrance. It is not necessary to search any other part of the block's outside surface, either behind or below those 2 rows. Again, whoever can see the diagram will be able to visualize the Mishnah. That is the end of Mishnah Aleph. Mishnah Bet now continues, even after a place has been searched, a weasel or other small animal could drag chametz there from a place that had not yet been searched. So to prevent this from happening, one would have to make sure that both places are searched at the same time. Now, if 2 places are searched simultaneously, both would be completely free from chametz at the same time, and there would be no chametz for an animal to take from one place to the other. We are not required to do so. The Mishnah will explain for the following reason. En choshishin shema girarach chulda mibayit lebayit. We are not obligated to be concerned that a weasel may have dragged chametz from a house that was not searched to a house that was searched, umimakom lamakom, or within one house from a place that was not searched to a place that was searched. Now the Rav explains, in the course of searching one's house, as one goes from place to place, a weasel could technically drag chametz from a corner that had not yet been searched to a corner that had been searched. Nevertheless, we do not need to worry that this might have happened for the following reason. Dim ken, the Mishnah says, for if so, if we would have to be concerned for these possibilities, mechatzer lechatzer umeir leir, we would also have to be concerned that a weasel may have dragged chametz from a courtyard, which the Rashi explains refers to the houses in a courtyard. There's no general requirement to search the courtyard itself. We would be concerned that a weasel took chametz from the houses in the courtyard that was not searched to a courtyard that was searched, right? The houses of a courtyard that was searched, and even from a town that was not searched to a town that was searched. And a davar sof, and there would be no end to the matter. So to completely eliminate the possibility of a weasel dragging chametz to a place that had already been searched, we would have to search every place in every town at the same time, and this is clearly impossible. As the Ran tells us, the sages therefore did not require us to be concerned for this possibility at all, even within one house or one courtyard. And again, just to explain, although the Mishnah writes mechatzer lechatzer, from courtyard to courtyard, like we explained, Rashi writes in this context, it refers to the houses in a courtyard, because like we said, generally, there is no requirement to search the courtyard itself, and like the Mishnah says, and the davar sof, there would be no end to this matter, so the sages do not require us to be concerned for this possibility at all, even within one house or one courtyard. That is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.